Today, does the future of weed lie in Georgia? Well, sort of. The Senate runoff elections in January will determine which party controls the Senate, but the cannabis industry is hopeful of reform regardless, which could be pivotal to marijuana's future. Joining us now to discuss why is Bloomberg's Tiffany Carey, who covers the cannabis industry. Tiffany, you and your colleague Ben Brody just dropped a Business Week story this morning. Why is Georgia's runoff election so important to the cannabis industry?
Hi. Yes, it is very important and in a very important year for the cannabis industry. So what's going on right now is the MORE Act, which is really the most aggressive form of legislation to legalize cannabis because it would remove it from the list of the most dangerous and illegal drugs. It just got through the House of Representatives. But as it stands right now, it's seen as absolutely having no chance getting on the Senate floor for a vote.
Okay, so
but in Georgia,
go ahead.
In Georgia, if the two Democrats win, then obviously that would flip the Senate from Republicans to Democrats, who've traditionally been more cannabis friendly. And more importantly, it also means that Mitch McConnell would be out as the Senate Majority Leader. He's been seen as this really big barrier to getting the MORE Act voted on in the Senate.
So why is federal legalization so important, given that in the United States it's already legal for medical purposes in 35 states, and then it's legal recreationally in 15 states, and voters, I mean, if we think about what happened a month ago, what we've said in the past is that marijuana was pretty much the only winner on the ballot in November.
That's right. Yeah, it does have this overwhelming popularity. There's already about a third of the U.S. population that already has access to it. But what changes if there's some sort of federal law is a lot for the industry, really, because, you know, right now they can't transport any sort of product or even raw materials across state lines. They can't access the capital markets. So these cannabis companies, they can't get regular bank loans or issue bonds. And of course, that affects their ability to grow and have liquidity. And they can't attract institutional investors either, really. So if it is legalized on a federal level, that really creates a huge bonus for this industry, which is already sort of doing better with one hand tied behind their back, and it creates all these profitable companies that are able to grow, fulfill whatever the consumer demand is much more quickly.
Yeah, well, okay, so talk about this a little more, because I think a lot of people who haven't actually been to a dispensary or perhaps live in a state where it's not yet legal don't really understand that even if it's legal in a certain state, because banks have to abide by federal laws, you sometimes have to pay with cash in these places, and these businesses have to really rely on cash, which can be pretty dangerous, right?
That's right. I think that, you know, some folks have expressed concern that they're, you know, making these huge cash deposits in banks that are worth more than, you know, the whole bank. It's just created this absurd situation for these companies when it goes time to pay their taxes. And it also obviously creates sort of difficulty tracing money flow as well. So, I mean, there is some hope, you know, even if the MORE Act doesn't pass, that the industry will get what's called the Safe Banking Act, which is a more narrow piece of legislation this year. And that also is sort of a political issue because it depends a bit on whether Toomey, the Pennsylvania Republican, is going to be taking over the banking committee. He seems more receptive to the act. So, you know, even if that happens, that's sort of seen as a big bonus for the industry this year. So what a lot of the lobbying folks are saying is, look, even if the MORE Act doesn't get through, there's this Safe Banking Act, and there's also something called the States Act, which would, you know, it has some measures, but it would mostly leave these decisions up to the states
Tiffany,
rather than have be scheduled.
Even if Mitch McConnell, even that Mitch McConnell is somebody who is seen as a roadblock to widespread legalization, or at least federal legalization, do you see this in your reporting, at least legalization and the easing of business restrictions around it on a federal level? Do you see that gaining more momentum as politicians around the country actually see the economic benefit that it's having or could have in their home states?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much talk because of the coronavirus about state budgets, and this is obviously something that could bring in huge tax revenue to these states. In fact, you see, you know, once New Jersey's legalized, New York has kind of upped its game and said, look, I think we're going to try to do this soon as well, because otherwise they know all the New Yorkers will just go to New Jersey and spend their money there, which is not, what the state would want. So, it's a huge time for talking about that. And also just the polls are showing so much more that, if 67% of people want this, if all these states that are actually Republican states like South Dakota and Montana have voted for it this year, it really changes the game in Washington. You have Republican representatives from these states there. They care about what's happening to their constituents, and they're going to bring up those issues as other Republicans.
Bloomberg's Tiffany Carey, live from New York. Thanks for your time, and the full Business Week article from Tiffany and her colleague can be found at Bloomberg.com right now.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.